Anita Moorjani is an international speaker and author of the New York Times bestseller, Dying to Be Me, and also the author of What If This Is Heaven? World renowned for her well-documented near-death experience, Anita's been featured on The Dr. Oz Show, Fox News, Today Show, CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, and many others. Anita, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to chat with you about this provocative and beautiful topic.
Indeed, I am especially glad to have you here today to talk about ancestral healing, as you have a relatively unique perspective because during your near-death experience, you actually communicated with your ancestors when you crossed over and lived to tell, so to speak. Would you mind first giving us just a brief idea of what you experienced with your NDE?
Sure. So I experienced an NDE as a result of end-stage cancer. I had lymphoma and I was struggling with it for 4 years, and I went into a coma because my organs shut down. And at that point, I weighed about 85 pounds. My lungs were filled with fluid. I had tumors all over my entire lymphatic system, starting from the base of my skull, and many of them were the size of golf balls. So from the base of my skull, all around my neck, under my arms, in my chest, and all the way down to my abdomen. Because of the fluid in my lungs, if I tried to lie flat, I would choke on my own fluid. And because of the cancer that was ravaging in my body stopped absorbing nutrition. And so I weighed about 85 pounds, but I also couldn't walk anymore because my muscles had completely deteriorated. And so I was in a tremendous amount of pain and discomfort by this point, by the time I reached end stage. And I fell into a coma. The doctors told my family I wasn't going to come out of the coma because my organs had now shut down. But unbeknownst to everyone around me, I was aware of everything that was happening around my body and beyond. And it felt like I had entered into another world, another realm. So although my physical body was here in the coma with my eyes closed, I was somewhere else. And I felt so light and free, and the pain was gone and the fear was gone. And then I started to experience other entities, and it felt like the other entities had come to help me to cross over. And all I could feel from these entities was just pure, unconditional love. That's all they felt for me, was love. There was no judgment whatsoever even for all the things that I thought I had done wrong in my life. They were just so loving and comforting. And it was like a kind of love that I've never experienced before. It felt like I didn't have to do anything to be worthy and deserving of this love. It was just there just because I existed. And I recognized one of the entities as my dad, who had died 10 years prior. And I knew that I was familiar with all the others, but I didn't recognize them from this lifetime. So I knew that they were related to me, probably either from other lifetimes or deceased loved ones who I had never met, who had passed away before I was even born. I'd lost one of my grandmothers passed away before I was even born, and of course could be great grandparents. So anyway, I did reach a point in that near-death experience where I realized I had the choice of whether to come back or to stay there. And no part of me wanted to come back, but it felt as though my dad wanted me to know that my purpose wasn't complete. And it felt as though, because now I knew that we are more powerful, but also now that I knew that I am guided, that there are all these people around me looking after me, I wasn't afraid to come back. And it was in that knowledge that my dad said to me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly. So that's the short version. And then I started to come out of the coma, and the cancer actually healed. And within 5 days, the tumors had shrunk by about 60%. And after 5 weeks, they could find no trace of cancer in my body. And I just had to physically build up my strength and my muscles to be able to take care of myself, which just took a couple of months. And that was in 2006. And I have been cancer-free since.
Wow. It's such a remarkable story, and you've told it in so many other places. People can read your books. You offer videos on your website. So I don't want to linger too long on that part of this incredible story. I want to go in a slightly different direction here. First, as you were talking, a question came to mind that I think we've all heard about, people who are on their deathbed, so to speak, seeing in the room, perhaps their late spouse or their grandparents or anything like that. Now, I realize that you were in a coma at the time, so you may not have had that experience, but can you address what you think is happening? Do you think they're really actually seeing these
Yes.
people, these beings?
I do believe we're actually seeing them. It's like a portal opens when you get very near death. You don't actually have to have, your heart doesn't have to stop beating. But I think when there is like a realm that we enter into as we are getting ready to pass away, and we start seeing it. Now, just a quick story I want to share about my mom. My mom is 93 years old. She's still alive. But 5 years ago, she had a fall and she broke her hip. And she was, because of her age, she was rushed to the ER and she was in the intensive care unit. And while she was in that intensive care unit and they were prepping her for the surgery, she was lying there, and the doctors told me that if for her age, it's critical, even going into surgery, she may not make it out. And of course, I was really sad and distraught because she's my mom. And I was there with her in the ICU, and she was a little bit delirious. And she started to say to me, she said, "Who are these people that are here in the room?" And she was pointing kind of upwards. And there was no one else in the room except her and me. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Who, Mom?" And she said, "Can't you see them? They're here, there, and there's one, there's somebody there." But she wasn't afraid. It felt very comforting to her that she was surrounded by these people. And I started to cry because I thought, they've come to get her. I thought, this is it. It could be my dad, it could be her parents. They've come to take her. Surprisingly, she made it through the surgery, and she's still with us 5 years on. And she doesn't even remember that. She doesn't even remember she saw that. Huh. But I do believe that they do come when we are in situations like that. Mm-hmm. So, and I believe a window opened for her where I actually believe that at some part of her even had a choice as to whether to cross over or stay here. And she chose to stay here. And I think because my brother and I both rushed to be by her side, and we kind of were like not ready to let her go. And my sister-in-law was there and my nephew, and we were all there, and we were not ready to let her go. And I think that had she been all alone, she might have chosen to cross over.
Hmm. Okay. Wow. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that you say she may have been given a choice. It sounds almost like she might have, if she was right there and they were ready to welcome her to the other side, and she came back. Yeah. So now, when you were on the other side, you mentioned that you definitely recognized your dad, and
Yes.
that there were all these other beings that you weren't sure specifically who they were, but you felt like they were perhaps relatives, ancestors, etc. Was there any time while you were, that you can remember, I realize you don't recall all of it, but do you recall remembering who any of these others were, or is that still a mystery?
It's a little bit of a mystery. One of them was my best friend who had passed away from cancer 2 years prior to me. So there was one that I definitely recognized other than my dad. So it was my dad and my best friend. And others that I knew were related, I knew they were, some of them felt, so there was a difference in the feeling. Some of them felt they had been incarnated in the past in human form, and they were there. In a way, it was like they were grandparents, great grandparents who I had never met in this physical life, but they were there comforting me because they knew exactly who I was, and so I knew they were related. But there were also other beings who almost felt like they had never been incarnated, but yet from a soul level, they were assigned to look out for me.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, it felt like there were different, and I don't call them different levels or tiers, because over here in the physical, we immediately interpret it as a hierarchy, that there are some that are more advanced than others. And I'm hesitant to use those terms, because in that realm there, because over here, when you have a hierarchy, it kind of makes some people feel like, oh, I'm looked after by someone who's superior and someone who's inferior. Or when we cross over, some of us have a more ascended experience and some don't. That's not the case on the other side. Over here, they're very competitive. Everybody wants to feel that, oh, I had the most ascended experience, or I have the most ascended masters looking out for me, or I am an incarnation of the most ascended people. And we have this very competitive way of viewing life, and so we carry it through into the way we view the afterlife. The afterlife is not like that. It's not competitive. It just is. Kind of like saying that somebody has been incarnated and somebody who's never been incarnated, what we call ascended masters, over there, we kind of just see it as a different species. It's like comparing horses to dogs. It's like a horse has a different role, a different energy, a different feel than a dog does. But anybody who has interacted with dogs, and anybody who has interacted with horses, will feel both are superbly beautiful, but very different. And so that's the best kind of example I can think of, where it's not a hierarchy, but there's just a difference between what we have labeled as ascended masters or our deceased loved ones and our ancestors.